In this video, I'm going to explain the truth about carbohydrates, debunk a lot of the myths you heard about carbohydrates, and explain why low-carb diets are always unsustainable, but what you should do differently to apply to your direct nutrition program. So at the end of this video, I'm going to give you some actual tactile information on how to apply the stuff that you learned today into your actual diet, so stick around for that. But my name's Adam Bunnell. I'm an online fat loss professional, and I work with men around the world using mechanisms of science to get them lean, predictably using metabolic priming. So there'll be a full video on metabolic priming on my YouTube channel, but the purpose of this video is to explain a lot of the truths that you've probably heard in today's society about carbohydrates and, the debunk a lot of the myths you heard about carbohydrates as well. So getting right into the video, I want to explain what carbohydrates do, the overall mechanism of what they do, and kind of what a carbohydrate is, right? So carbohydrates, first of all, have a 10% thermic effect, which means that you eat 100 calories, 90% of that only gets digested, and 10% of it actually gets broken down in the calorie conversion digestion process. It has a 4 calorie per gram, and it also supports essential body functions, which is your BMR, right? Your 60% of your entire metabolism is your BMR. So the body wants to burn carbohydrates. It's the preferred energy source of the body. So the body wants to burn carbohydrates. It wants to use carbohydrates to burn energy, right? So as you start to raise carbohydrates, you get a good calorie burn effect and also a reduction in leptin, right? So what leptin is the satiety hormone, right? So you lower leptin, you feel more satiated. So in low-carb diets, one, leptin can spike, and you can feel like that you don't get satiated when you do eat. So it also gets broken down to glucose for energy, and extra is stored in the liver. So yes, you overeat on carbohydrates, but you overeat on calorie-wise on carbohydrates, you do gain weight. And in today's society, in the American society, obviously we have a ton of problems within the nutrition industry with overconsumption of carbohydrates, but it's specifically because people don't understand, one, how to track macronutrients, exactly what type of macronutrients, how many carbohydrates is in each meal. So what we need to know is that, one, why you need carbohydrates in your diet, right? So like I said, carbohydrates reduce leptin and they reduce hunger, right? So carbohydrates mechanistically want to reduce hunger. They want to reduce leptin. They want to make you feel more satiated, right? And so another mechanism is that it actually reduces inflammation, right? So carbohydrates' main mechanism is reducing inflammation, reducing adrenal fatigue, and reducing cortisol in the body. And that's specifically important because if you have a high amount of inflammation in your body, you have a high amount of cortisol in the form of stress hormone, then one, your body won't want to lose body fat. It'll restrict you from losing body fat. And cortisol, for instance, is the number one leading factor for a lot of people who can't lose body fat because their body is so stressed out. And if you're doing like low carb diets, you're doing extreme food restriction, doing a bunch of cardio, the body will start to fight back. And to do that properly and to reduce that properly, you add carbohydrates in the diet. So I want to explain a story about one of our clients recently that has been with us for a while, and he got pretty low on calories, right? So with low-calorie dieting, getting in low calories, there's a game to be played, and the game is inflammation reduction, right? So one of our clients, his name's Rick, we got him pretty lean, and we got him pretty low in calories, and he kind of plateaued out in weight, right? And so what we did is we actually cut his cardio. We gave him 100 more grams of carbohydrates, and we gave him that for 4 days, right? So we call it like a diet break. And there's multiple ways that you can do diet breaks and refeeds. But what we did was give him his body a full break, reduce a lot of inflammation, reduce a lot of that cortisol in the body, and he actually, one, leaned out within a couple days, right? And so when I tell people online that, one, carbohydrates are doing these type of things to my clients, they don't really believe me. They don't believe that, one, you can eat more carbohydrates and you can actually eat more food, feel more satiated, and not put yourself in a position to either rebound or feel very hungry. But here's tons of my personal clients right here that are up a significant amount of carbohydrates and down a significant amount of weight, right? And so with carbohydrates in general, they reduce a lot of that cortisol. They reduce a lot of that, inflammation within the body that restricts people from actually losing body fat. And when we give these clients carbohydrates, they start to get better performance in the gym. They start to, feel better cognitively, and they start to improve in a lot of different areas because of the carbohydrates, right? So it also improves cognition. So carbohydrates, one, produce glucose, right? So your brain is run off glucose, right? So getting more carbohydrates in your diet improves cognition, right? So you've probably heard from a friend or online that I don't eat carbs because they make me fat, right? So in the case study, Craving for Carbohydrates, they actually reported a 39% increase in binge eating patterns with carbohydrate restriction. So in this case study, what they did was they found out that carbohydrate restriction actually puts you in a mechanistic place to actually gain more weight for a couple different reasons. One being the less amount of food you eat, the less amount of carbohydrates you eat, the less satiated you could be, but also the slower your metabolism gets, right? Because you know how I mentioned earlier that 60% of your metabolism is the basal metabolic rate, and carbohydrates quite literally, help with the functioning of the basal metabolic rate. So when people start to go low in carbohydrates, they put themselves in a position to, one, rebound very quickly with the lack of actually satiety in the food that they eat, but also that their metabolism starts to lower as well. So there's a big misconception in today's society that, one, carbohydrates are bad. And yes, if you eat enough food, if you eat enough carbohydrates, eventually you will gain weight. But there is a strategic approach for carbohydrates in your diet that actually helps you lose body fat. So even in another case study, de novo lipogenesis, they found that carbohydrates do actually not store body fat, right? And so, why do they say that carbohydrates make you fat, right? Why is there a common misconception that carbohydrates make you gain weight? So in this case study, they actually took a group of people and they overfed them 1,000 calories, right? And what they were trying to find was the actual percentage-wise of what carbohydrates actually store as body fat, right? And what they actually found was that only 2% of the over 1,000 calories that they were eating stored as body fat. What was the majority of the body fat that they stored when they gained weight and put themselves in a 1,000-calorie surplus? It was fat intake, right? The actual fat intake, the macromolecule of fat, because the body wants to store body fat. It does not want to store carbohydrates, right? And so, one, if you understand this mechanistically and the actual studies that they have actually done on this subject, you can start to realize, one, where people really go wrong, because the American diet itself is high in fats, and what it does is basically carbohydrates will help pad calories, but the body will store fat, right? So even for a lot of our personal clients, when they come to us, one thing that we do is that if they come into us with a low calorie amount, or maybe they come to us and have been overeating on fats and undereating on carbohydrates, what we actually do is we switch the two around. We cut the fat a little bit lower, we raise the carbohydrates a little bit higher, and within a few weeks, they actually lose a significant amount of weight. And why is that? Is because when you understand what the macronutrient fat is, it does not have a thermic effect. It has like maybe a 3% thermic effect, but also it's very slow digestion with a 9 calorie per gram, which is twice as much as the carbohydrates, right? So one, if you switch out a lot of fat intake for carbohydrate intake, you will actually be eating, one, less calories, but also you'll have more room for the carbohydrates to do what it's meant to do, which was reduce lactate, make you feel more satiated, reduce a lot of inflammation, and you start to see the body, one, start to fill up with glucose and intramuscularly, and you start to get that good popping look, but also a lot of inflammation starts to go away as well. So the real problem is when you make hard food rules, you make unintended consequences. And what I mean by this is that, one, if you tell yourself, I can't have carbohydrates, what's the main thing that you're going to be thinking of? Carbohydrates. So it's kind of like this, like imagine telling yourself, I don't want to learn how to swim when, the world is X amount percent of water, or majority of water, right? And the same thing kind of applies with carbohydrates. If you're scared of carbohydrates and you don't know how to use carbohydrates, obviously it's less beneficial than knowing exactly how much carbohydrates you need to eat, but also making sure that you're eating enough to support essential body functions and support your metabolism, right? And so when people make these very hard consequences, these very hard food rules on their diet, one, it puts them in a place where they are more likely to gain the weight back, and they're more likely to crave the foods that they do want to eat in the form of maybe snacks that they normally would eat, or big high food cravings, because the carbohydrates that they need are no longer present, which is no longer reducing the leptin that they actually need to feel satiated. So when you make hard food rules, you make hard consequences, right? And so with that being said, is like understanding what dieting is you want to understand how to make fat loss the easiest, right? And what I mean by that is to make fat loss the easiest, you need to make it as easy as possible with the least amount of barriers and least amount of restriction. And so what that looks like is, one, with our clients, we give them the exact amount of carbohydrates to eat, exact amount of fat to eat, exact amount of protein to eat, and we let them use flexible dieting to hit those macronutrients. So you don't no longer feel like you're dieting, right? You get a little bit of flexibility, because when you get flexibility, you can create consistency, and consistency long-term creates sustainability, right? So the second big problem is that carbohydrate restriction is disregarded from the actual food quantity, right? So a lot of people who do low-carb diets or try low-carb diets, they do lose a significant amount of weight. And I've seen people 20, 30, 40 pounds, whatever it may be, with a carbohydrate-restricted diet. And what that really is, when you break down the science, is they're just cutting out a macronutrient, which leads to less amount of calories, right? And so they're just simply eating less calories. But eventually you get to that plateau in the road where, one, you either get stuck eating low amounts of carbohydrates, eating low amounts of macronutrients, and you don't exactly know what to do because you've never learned the actual tactile information of how much carbohydrates to eat. And even when clients who have came to us in the past, you can usually tell within body composition, the actual clients that come, they've tried low carb diets, they've tried multiple fat diets, and they've lost the weight, but they've gained it back, because lowering that food and getting stuck in that kind of metabolic purgatory is what they call it. One, you put yourself in a position to gain the weight back quickly, right? So even within the nutrition society, they have a statistic that says that 30% of people who lose 10, 15 pounds actually keep it off, right? And after 3 years, that number dwindles. And so why we start to think, like, why is it? Like, why do people not have a weight loss problem? They have a keeping weight off problem, right? Because there's just people who lose the weight, but they always gain it back. And it's really because you don't know how much to eat. You don't know how much to eat. And you don't know, exactly how much protein, carbs, and fats that you even need to eat for consistency and how your body really works. And being one-sided, all or nothing mentality keeps people, from losing this weight over and over the course of years, destroying their metabolic pathways. So my tactical information for you is that, one, with your diet right now, if you're somebody who is tracking calories, or you're tracking macronutrients, I want you to assess what you're currently eating macronutrient-wise, right? So track your food in the food tracking app and exactly see what your protein, carbs, and fats are. So what I want you to do is, one, I want you to take a look at your fat intake. I want you to take a look at how much fat intake you're actually eating. And I want you to actually lower that and then raise some carbohydrates. And I guarantee you, within the first 2 weeks, you will lose some weight, you will feel better, your mental clarity will improve, and also your energy will go up. So comment down below if you've tried this and it has worked for you, because like I said, this is the exact process I use with all my clients, and we just switch those two around and they break fat loss plateaus, they feel better, they actually get to eat more food quantity-wise, but also they feel more satiated. So if you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe. We'll be posting another video on Friday, and it's going to be a really interesting video. I got something really fun planned for us on Friday. So make sure to subscribe to my channel, turn my alarms on, and so you get that video on Friday, because it's going to be a one-of-a-kind, and I'm really excited. So anyways, if you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Let me know how your guys' nutrition and training is going, and so I can help you further. But I'll see you guys next time.